Jada was 17 when she first stepped onto the military base with her uncle. She had never seen so many soldiers in one place before. The base was busy, full of noise, movement, and discipline. Soldiers were marching, training, shouting commands. And vehicles rolled by in the background. Jada kept looking around, amazed by everything. Her uncle, a retired army sergeant, walked beside her proudly. He had spent most of his life wearing the uniform, and this visit brought back memories for him. He was here to meet an old friend, but Jada had her eyes on something else as they walked past a large building. She heard sharp popping sounds, gunfire from the range. Jada paused and turned her head, watching the soldiers aim and shoot with perfect form. There was something about it that pulled her attention completely. Her uncle noticed her staring and smiled, curious. He asked. She nodded slowly. "I want to try it," she said, her voice low but steady. Her uncle raised his eyebrows, not in disapproval, but in surprise. He didn't expect her to say that, "You want to shoot?" He asked again, just to make sure. "Yes," she said confidently. "I want to try shooting like them." He chuckled softly. "All right then, come with me." He led her around the range to where the officers were standing. At the front was a tall man with short gray hair, clean uniform, and hard eyes, Colonel Briggs. He was known for his strict discipline and sharp tongue. Jada's uncle gave him a respectful salute and introduced himself. Then he introduced Jada, adding, "She's my niece. She's interested in the range." Colonel Briggs looked down at her, confused for a moment. "She wants to observe." He asked. "No, sir," Jada said quickly. "I want to try shooting." There was a pause, a long one. The colonel blinked, then gave a short, loud laugh. He wasn't cruel, but he clearly thought it was funny. "You want to shoot here?" he repeated, still smiling. "This isn't a video game, young lady. This is real steel." A few nearby soldiers chuckled, some looking amused, others curious. Jada felt her cheeks heat up, but she didn't look away. "Yes, sir," she said again. "I want to learn." The colonel gave her a look, the kind that said, "You don't belong here," but he didn't say it aloud. Instead, he waved a hand toward the firing lanes and said, "Maybe one day, but this place isn't for play." Her uncle stepped in, gently guiding her away from the group. "Don't take it personally," he said. "They just don't expect it from someone like you." "Someone like me?" she asked, confused. "Yeah," he said. "You're young. You're not military. Huh? And you're a girl. Most don't expect someone like you to show interest." Jada didn't reply, but inside her, something burned. It wasn't anger, not exactly. Was fire? A challenge? She kept thinking about the way the colonel laughed, the way the soldiers didn't even consider she could try. It was like she didn't exist in their world. That night, after they left the base, Jada didn't speak much. She kept thinking and thinking, her thoughts racing. Back home, she searched online for firearm training. She found videos, guides, books, anything that explained the basics. She watched how people stood, how they breathed, how they aimed. She even printed out paper targets and taped them on her bedroom wall. She stood there, holding a wooden stick as if it were a rifle. Practicing her stance, she closed one eye, breathed slow, and mimicked the trigger squeeze. Every night, she practiced. She also found a local shooting club that allowed beginners to learn using air rifles and pellet guns. She joined quietly, using money saved from her part-time job at a diner. The coach was an older woman who noticed Jada's determination quickly. She showed up early, stayed late, and always asked questions. Jada learned quickly not just how to aim, but how to control her breath, how to focus, how to stay calm under pressure. Soon, she was hitting bullseyes regularly. At first, the others in the club didn't pay attention to her, but now they watched her with respect. She was quiet, focused, and improving faster than anyone expected. But in her heart, she wasn't doing it for them. She was doing it because of that moment at the base. That laugh, that doubt, that look from Colonel Briggsette had lit something inside her. She didn't want revenge, but she wanted to show what she could do. She wanted to walk back into that same range, not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right every night before bed. She whispered to herself, "One day they'll see." And so, her journey truly began, not with a gun in her hand, but with a fire in her heart. Jada woke up early every morning before school. She had made a plan for herself, a schedule that was tight but clear. Wake up at 5, stretch for 10 minutes, then practice dry shooting for 30 minutes. No real gun yet, but she used a wooden stick shaped like a rifle. She had drawn a red dot on her bedroom wall, pretending it was the bullseye. Her breathing was slow, her hands steady, and her focus sharp. After school, she worked at a small diner as a waitress. She saved every extra tip she could get, even skipping snacks to keep money aside. Her goal was simple: to one day afford her own gear, her own real weapon. She didn't want to just try shooting anymore. She wanted to be good at it, maybe even the best, at night, after work. She went to the local air rifle club again. The coach there, Mrs. Alina, was a retired shooting trainer who had once trained military cadets. She noticed something different in Jada from the beginning. This girl wasn't just interested, she was serious. She asked the right questions, never wasted time, and stayed behind to clean the gear and reset the targets. One evening, after a practice session, Mrs. Alina pulled Jada aside. "Tell me something," she asked. "Why do you want to do this so badly?" Jada thought for a moment and said, "Because someone laughed at me." Mrs. Alina gave a small nod. "Good, let them laugh. Just make sure they're clapping later." That night, Jada couldn't sleep. She thought about the colonel again, his smirk, the way he waved her away like she didn't belong. It stung, but now it pushed her. She told herself she'd go back there one day. Not to impress anyone, but to prove that effort, not background, decided greatness. Weeks turned into months, and Jada improved fast. Her hands knew the right grip. Her body understood the stance. Her breath slowed at the right moment. The paper targets she once feared now came back with perfect groupings. She had even started helping new members of the club, showing them how to aim and control their nerves. Her mother began noticing the change in her too. Jada was more focused, more confident, and her eyes looked stronger than before. She didn't understand everything about shooting, but she supported her daughter fully. One day, she handed Jada an envelope. Was her savings. "I don't have much," she said, "but if this helps you get what you need, take it." Jada was speechless. She hugged her mother tightly. With that money, she was finally able to buy her first .22 caliber precision rifle. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, and it felt like holding her dream in her hands. She named it quietly Justice. She trained harder now, entering small competitions and winning second or third place most times. She didn't win every match, but each loss taught her more than the victories. She started studying the habits of top shooters, watching interviews, reading training routines, and writing down notes. Her room was filled with targets, charts, and quotes like, "Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most." Her coach told her about a civilian challenge held every few months on a retired military base. It was known for attracting tough competitors, including ex-soldiers and even retired special forces. Mrs. Alina looked at her one evening and said, "I think it's time you show them who you are." Jada nodded, her heart pounding. She knew that was her chance to return to the same place where she had first been laughed at. This time, she wouldn't come as a curious girl. She would come as a trained shooter. She started preparing with more discipline than ever, running every morning to improve her stamina, lifting weights at night to build strength. She learned how to shoot under pressure, while tired, while sweating, even with loud noises playing in the background. It wasn't just about the gun anymore, it was about her mind, her body, her will. One afternoon, as she cleaned her rifle, she saw her reflection in the polished metal. She didn't see the girl who had once been ignored at the base. She saw someone who didn't quit, someone who worked in silence while others laughed. She smiled softly and whispered, "I'm coming back." The date of the competition was finally announced 3 weeks away. It would be held on the very base where she had first asked to shoot. She registered without hesitation, writing her name clearly in the entry form the day before the event. She packed her gear carefully. Her uniform was simple, her boots were clean, and her rifle was ready. She stood in front of the mirror, her heart steady, her eyes sharp. She wasn't nervous, she was ready. She knew the colonel might be there. She knew some would remember her, maybe even laugh again. But this time, the only sound she wanted to hear was the shot hitting the bullseye. Not laughter, not doubt, just the sound of skill. Earned the heart. Way as the sun rose the next morning, Jada stood outside the gates of the same base. This time, she wasn't asking for permission. She was stepping in to prove what hard work could do. She had no titles, no rank, no fame, just a demand, a reason, and sometimes that's more than enough. The sun was still low in the sky when Jada arrived at the base. She wore a plain black hoodie, dark jeans, and boots. Carrying her rifle case in one hand, her hair was tied back neatly, and her expression was calm. She looked like any other visitor, but inside, her heart was steady and sharp. She had waited months for this moment. At the entrance, a young soldier looked at her papers and checked the list of registered names. He gave her a short nod. "You're clear. Range is down the left path, 3rd gate." She thanked him and walked in, her steps firm but quiet. It was the same place where she was once laughed at, but this time, nobody laughed. Nobody even noticed her. The base was hosting a civilian marksmanship challenge, open to the public but overseen by military staff. Former soldiers, police shooters, and trained civilians had come to compete. There were over 50 names on the list, all aiming for one goal: hit the highest score and prove your skill. Jada walked past men twice her age, tall and built, some joking around, others already adjusting their rifles. She found her lane, number 27, and laid down her gear quietly. Next to her, a man with a buzzcat looked at her rifle and raised an eyebrow. "First time?" he asked with a smirk. Jada smiled politely and replied, "No," then went back to checking her sights on the far side of the range. A small group of military officers stood watching. Among them, dressed sharply as always, was Colonel Briggs. He hadn't changed much, same sharp jaw, same stiff posture. He scanned the lineup with a bored look until his eyes landed on her. For a second, his expression froze, then softened into a small frown of recognition. He leaned to the officer beside him and said, "Is that girl from last time?" The officer shrugged. "Name says Jada Brooks." The colonel blinked slowly. "Well, let's see what she's got." The event started with basic target shooting at 100 yards. Each shooter had to fire 5 rounds. Center mass, under timed pressure. A voice called over the loudspeaker, "Shooters, stand ready." Jada took her position, feet firm, rifle tight against her shoulder. Down the scope, she didn't rush, didn't look around, didn't worry who was watching. She took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. The sound of her shot was just one among many, but her target, when retrieved, told a different story. The range officer held up her paper with wide eyes. 5 shots, nearly touching each other. Dead center. A murmur went through the crowd. A few heads turned. The man beside her looked again, this time with respect. "Damn," he whispered. "Nice shooting." Jada nodded without a word, focusing on the next round. She wasn't done yet, not even close. The second stage was even harder, shooting from a prone position with wind resistance. Most shooters struggled with it, missing their marks or drifting wide, but Jada adjusted calmly, calculating wind speed and breathing evenly. Her bullets cut through the air like they had minds of their own. When the scores came up, she was in the top 3. Colonel Briggs was no longer bored. He stepped closer to the screens and crossed his arms, watching carefully each time her name moved higher on the scoreboard. His eyebrows rose just a little more. "She's good," one officer said beside him. "Better than most of our recruits," said another. Jada moved to the third stage, rapid fire on 3 moving targets. This was where many competitors failed. The targets shifted unpredictably, forcing the shooter to adjust quickly and fire in rhythm. Jada closed her eyes for a moment before the round started. She imagined the pattern, felt her heartbeat slow, and counted silently. Then the buzzer sounded. She moved with precision, hitting each target in motion with only one miss. Gasps echoed across the range, even a few claps. One of the older SEAL veterans watching muttered, "She's got trigger discipline like a ghost sniper." Colonel Briggs now stood still, his arms no longer crossed, his expression unreadable, but his eyes stayed locked on her. The final stage was the hardest physical stress test, followed by precision shot. Each shooter had to run a short sprint, drop for 10 push-ups, then shoot 5 targets under 1 minute. Jada watched 2 men before her miss nearly every shot due to heavy breathing and shaky hands. Then it was her turn. She ran, dropped, pushed herself up and down 10 times, got to her feet and raised her rifle. Her breath was heavy but steady, her hands firm, her eyes clear. 1 shot, 2, 3, 4 bullseyes, 1 near miss, a near-perfect score under pressure. As she stepped back, catching her breath, the colonel finally stepped forward. He approached slowly, hands behind his back. For a moment, Jada thought he might say nothing. Then he nodded slightly, just once, and said, "You've improved, Jada." Met his eyes calmly. "I told you I wanted to try." He gave the smallest smile and replied, "Looks like you did more than try, and for the first time." The base didn't feel like someone else's world. It felt like a place she belonged. Jada stood under the shade of the tent, drinking water slowly. Her hands were still shaking a little, not from fear, but from the rush of energy. She had just completed one of the hardest shooting challenges in the event, and even though she wasn't sure of the final score yet, she knew deep inside she had done something special. People were talking around her now. Earlier, no one had paid attention to the young black girl with a second-hand rifle, but now heads were turning. Whispers were spreading. Some were saying that girl's a natural. Others asked, where did she train? She's not even military. Jada didn't care about the attention. She just sat on a bench near the back, closed her eyes, and breathed slowly. She thought about her mother, her uncle, Mrs. Alina, and all the quiet nights of training she remembered. Every laugh, every doubt, and every time someone said, "You can't," and she smiled because she just did. When the final scores were posted on the large screen near the command post, a small crowd gathered. Jada walked over quietly and looked up. Her name was 3rd overall out of over 50 shooters, many of them trained veterans. She didn't win first place, but she was the only woman in the top 10, and definitely the youngest. There was a short ceremony where names were called, medals were handed out, and hands were shaken. The colonel stood near the podium, calling each name and offering a few words. When he read out, "Jada Brooks," he paused, looked at her with a strange mix of pride and disbelief, then said clearly, "Strong hands, steady mind." She stepped forward, shook his hand, and gave a small smile. It wasn't for the medal, it was for the moment after the event, as people began packing their gear. A few soldiers came over to talk to her, one said. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Another asked, "Have you ever thought about joining the military?" Jada didn't answer right away. She was still taking it all in. The change in how they now saw her, not as a girl trying to play soldier, but as someone who had earned respect. Later that evening, as the sun began to fall behind the hills, Colonel Briggs approached her again. This time, he wasn't smiling or joking. He looked serious, almost thoughtful. "I owe you an apology," he said plainly. Jada looked up at him, surprised. "You came here once, wanting to learn." "And I laughed," he continued. "I didn't see the fire in you then, but I see it now." Jada nodded. "I didn't come back for you, sir." He gave a short nod. "I know," he said. "And that's why it matters even more." They stood in silence for a moment. Then the colonel said something unexpected. "If you ever want to train with our advanced shooters, I can make that happen." Jada didn't answer immediately. It wasn't a small offer, not for someone like her, still civilian, still young, but inside. She already knew her answer. "I'll think about it," she said calmly. He smiled slightly. "You should." Back at home that night, Jada placed her medal on the table. Her mom held it gently, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she whispered. Jada smiled. "Almost," she replied. "There's still more to come." The next day, her phone started buzzing constantly. Photos from the event had gone online, and someone had posted a clip of her final challenge. Within hours, it had thousands of views, and comments poured in. People were amazed by how calm and skilled she was. Some called her the silent shooter. Others called her the girl who shook the range. News outlets started contacting her for interviews. Even some big names in the shooting world were talking about her. But through it all, Jada stayed quiet. She didn't let it change her. She returned to Mrs. Elena's range 2 days later and began training again. Same wooden targets, same quiet focus, same humble routine. When Mrs. Elena saw her, she smiled wide and said, "So, you broke the silence." Jada laughed softly, just cracked it a little. Elena handed her a new set of ear protectors, shiny, black, and custom-made gift from an old friend, she said. Said the girl earned it. Jada placed them over her ears, took her stance, aimed, and fired. The sound was softer now, but the focus was the same. She wasn't training to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing medals or headlines. She was chasing mastery, quiet, steady, and full of heart. And somewhere deep in the base, the same colonel who once laughed at her now carried her name on a list of people to watch, to support, and maybe to learn from, because sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks through action. And Jada's actions were loud enough to echo across walls that once shut her out. Weeks passed since the shooting challenge, but Jada didn't slow down. Instead, she trained harder, longer, and smarter. She wasn't chasing another medal. She was chasing something deeper, something inside her. She wanted to push her limits. See how far she could really go. One day, Jada received a message from an unknown number. It was short. "You've been invited to join our advanced training course for civilian tactical shooters. Respond if interested." Attached was a logo. She recognized the same group that helped train Special Forces, former Navy SEALs, and elite snipers. At first, Jada thought it was fake, but when she showed it to Mrs. Elena, her coach went quiet. "This is real," she said slowly, "and rare. Very rare." Jada's eyes widened. "But I'm not military." Mrs. Elena nodded. "They don't care about that anymore. They care about talent, and you've already proven you have it." Jada stared at the message, her heart pounding. She knew this training wouldn't be easy. It would be tougher, more intense, and more physical than anything she had done before. But she didn't hesitate. She replied, "I accept." 2 weeks later, she stood at the gates of a private training ground deep in the woods. There were no signs, no crowds, just a long dirt road, armed guards, and the sound of gunfire echoing from far away. Inside, about 15 people had gathered, men and women, all in perfect shape, most of them older and military trained. Jada looked around and felt like a shadow among giants. But she didn't let that feeling shake her. The lead instructor, a tall man with a deep scar down his cheek, introduced himself simply as Locke. He didn't smile, didn't explain much, just said, "Here, we don't care where you come from, only how far you're willing to go." Then he pointed at the obstacle course behind him and shouted, "Move." The training was brutal. Each morning started at 4 a.m. with running, crawling through mud, carrying weights, and timed sprints. After that came the weapon drill, shooting while moving, changing targets under stress, and team simulations. Jada's body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. Her arms were sore, her legs heavy, and her hands were red from holding the rifle. For hours, more than once, she saw others drop out. One man faked an injury to leave. Another just packed his gear and walked away. But Jada stayed, quiet and focused. She wasn't the strongest, but she was steady, and she never gave up. One night, during gear cleaning, another trainee named Aaron sat beside her. He had served in the Marines for 6 years and now worked as a private contractor. He looked at her with honest curiosity. "You're different," he said. "You don't talk much, but you don't quit either." Jada smiled. "I didn't come here to talk," Aaron laughed. "Fair enough, but they're watching you, especially Locke." By the end of the second week, the trainees were put into groups and given mock missions, night operations, hostage rescue drills, and silent movement under pressure. Jada was paired with 2 men and 1 woman. All experienced, she was nervous. But once the mission started, her training took over. She moved quietly, gave clear signals. And when the time came to shoot, her aim was flawless. After the mission, Locke walked over to her and said only one word: precise. It was the first time he had spoken to her directly, and it meant more than a medal. On the 4th week, they were tested with one of the hardest challenges, the gauntlet. It was a 3-hour non-stop test of strength, focus, and shooting skill. Trainees had to carry heavy packs, climb through tunnels, swim across cold water, and shoot moving targets with soaked clothes and shaking hands. Jada was exhausted before the 2nd hour. Her knees hurt, her vision blurred, and her breathing was loud in her ears. She thought about quitting just for a second. Then she remembered that day, months ago, the laugh, the smirk, the look that told her she didn't belong. That memory pushed her forward. She bit her lip, tightened her grip, and kept going. By the end, only 6 people completed the gauntlet. Jada was one of them. Locke called them forward and handed each a small silver coin. It wasn't money yet, was a symbol, a mark of completion. "You earned this," he said, looking straight at Jada. When she returned home, her mother opened the door and hugged her tight. "You lost weight," she whispered, "but you look stronger." Jada placed the coin beside her first medal on the shelf. She looked at both and whispered, "Still not done." Because now, she wasn't just good. She was trained, tested, and recognized by some of the best. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. This was just another step in a much bigger path. She wasn't chasing fame or followers. She was chasing mastery, one shot, one breath, one step at a time. It had been 5 months since Jada first stepped into that training ground in the woods. Now, she stood at a new location, Old Airfield, where the SEAL qualification challenge was about to begin. It wasn't part of the military system, but designed by retired Navy SEALs as a civilian version of their toughest shooting exams. The best part? It was open to anyone, but finishing it was nearly impossible. Only a few completed the course every year, and very few ever broke records. Jada stood silently among the competitors. There were 30 of them, strong, tall, confident men and women, all with high-level training. Some had special gloves, heavy gear, and customized rifles. Jada only had her basic gear. Her black gloves and her rifle justice. Her clothes were simple. Her focus was sharp. People whispered. Noticing her, some remembered her from the last shooting event. Others looked at her and thought she wouldn't last. One man even leaned to his friend and said, "She quit halfway. You'll see." Jada heard it, but she didn't react. Before the event started, a former SEAL named Riker stood on a raised platform and spoke. "This isn't about looking good or sounding tough," he said. "This test will break your hands, your breath, your patience, and your ego." Then he looked around and added, "If you survive it, you don't need to speak. Your score will speak for you." The first stage was a timed obstacle run high walls. Crawling under wire, carrying weighted bags. Jada ran hard, jumped, climbed, and pushed through without stopping. Her training in the forest paid off, and while she wasn't the fastest, she never hesitated. She finished the course with mud on her face and sweat running down her back. Stage 2 was long-range shooting with the twist shooters had to hit 5 targets at different distances while lying in a cold water trench. The water made hands shake, and most missed 2 or 3 targets. Jada lay in the freezing water, feeling her arms go numb. She took a deep breath, aimed slowly, and fired one round at a time for direct hits. One slightly off, even the spotter raised an eyebrow. By stage 4, people had started to notice. Who was this girl with quiet eyes and calm hands? How was she staying steady when others were yelling and panicking? Stage 5 was the stress challenge. Each shooter had to carry a 60-pound sandbag for half a mile, then immediately shoot 10 targets from standing, kneeling, and prone positions. Most failed this one. They were too tired to aim straight. Jada's arms burned. Her legs felt like stone. But she kept moving when she reached the shooting point. Her chest was rising fast, her breath short, but she dropped to one knee, lifted her rifle, and began bang, bang, bang. One after another, the targets fell. A group of instructors stood watching, silent but impressed. One of them whispered, "She's keeping up with Tier 1 guys." The next challenge was the silent room. Each shooter had to enter a dark building filled with cardboard hostiles and civilians. They had 30 seconds to make decisions, shoot the threats, spare the innocents, and exit clean. This test wasn't just about shooting. It was about control. Thinking fast and not panicking. Many competitors hit innocent targets by mistake. Losing points, Jada entered the room like a shadow. She had practiced for this moment, calm under pressure. Eyes always moving. Inside, she fired 5 times, all accurate, and didn't hit a single friendly when she exited. Riker stood waiting and gave a small nod. By the end of the day, only 10 people remained. Jada sat under the shade, her hands bruised, her muscles sore, but her mind was strong. The scoreboard hadn't been revealed yet, but whispers were everywhere. Some were saying she might break a record. Others didn't believe it. Finally, the scores were posted on the large screen. Everyone stood still, waiting to see their names. When Jada looked up, she froze. There it was, her name, in bold letters. Jada Brooks, new record holder. There was silence at first. Then gasps. One man clapped, then another, until the entire group was clapping. Even the competitors who had doubted her stood and nodded in respect. Riker walked up to her with a small black plaque. "Never seen anyone do it like that," he said, handing it to her, calm, cold, and clean. She took it, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered as she stood there. People surrounded her not as fans, but as equals. Even the same man who had doubted her earlier came forward and said, "I was wrong about you." She looked him in the eyes and replied, "I didn't come to prove you wrong. I came to prove me right." That night, the photo of Jada holding her plaque went viral online. The caption read, "She wasn't supposed to win." But she didn't read the rules. Jada sat alone under the stars, holding the plaque close. She didn't feel famous or proud. She felt peaceful. She had broken. More than a record, she had broken the idea that someone like her couldn't do this. And that, to her, meant everything. A few days after breaking the record, Jada returned home. But life had changed now. She wasn't just a quiet girl with a dream anymore. She was the girl who broke a SEAL challenge record. People recognized her on the street. Strangers sent her messages. Schools invited her to speak. But Jada still lived the same wake-quiet mornings, focused training, and long hours in the shooting range. She didn't let fame distract her. For her, it wasn't about being famous. It was about being better than yesterday. One morning, she got a call from the base where everything had first started. It was Colonel Briggs, his voice clear and steady. "Miss Brooks," he said, "I'd like to invite you back to the range, not as a visitor, as a guest instructor." Jada held the phone tight for a moment, her heart still. The same man who once laughed at her was now asking her to teach. She smiled slightly. "I'll be there." When she arrived at the base, it was different this time. She walked through the gates with her head high, carrying her gear bag on her back. Soldiers walking by gave her respectful nods. Some even whispered her name inside the training area. The colonel was waiting. This time with a handshake, not a laugh. "Welcome back," he said. "We've got some new recruits who need to learn what discipline really looks like." Jada looked at the Groupian soldiers, mostly fresh out of boot camp. Some looked tough, some nervous, some cocky. She knew their type because once she had been the outsider too. Now she stood in front of them with calm authority. She didn't speak loudly, but every word hit harder than a shout. "Before you touch a rifle," she said, "learn to respect it, and learn to respect yourselves." Her first demonstration was silent. She set up 5 targets, walked back, and without a single wasted motion, hit each one dead center. The group went silent, watching in awe. One recruit whispered, "She's like a machine." Another said, "No, she's just better." After the session, one of the young soldiers, a girl named Kayla, came to Jada alone. She had wide eyes and a quiet voice. "Ma'am," she said, "can I ask something personal?" Jada nodded. "Were you ever scared?" Jada thought for a moment, then answered, "Yes. I was scared every step of the way. But I did it anyway, and fear became my fuel." That evening, Jada walked through the base alone, remembering her first visit, the same buildings, the same air. But everything had changed inside her. She stood by the same shooting lane where she was once laughed at. Now she was here as someone they respected. Someone who made history. The next day, the colonel invited her to a closed-door meeting. There were other officers, there are men and women with medals and long records of service. They spoke about new training methods, new programs, and wanted Jada's opinion. She listened quietly, then spoke with calm confidence. She talked about discipline, focus, and how to train not just the body, but the mind. After the meeting, the colonel pulled her aside. "You've done more than prove yourself," he said. "You've inspired people in this base and beyond." Jada nodded. "I didn't plan any of this," he replied. "That's what makes it real." Over the next few weeks, Jada was invited to more bases, schools, and youth programs. She became a quiet symbol of what was possible. People from all backgrounds wrote letters to her, girls who wanted to try, boys who were afraid to fail, mothers who had daughters like her. She read each one, sometimes with tears in her eyes. One letter from a young girl said, "My dad said girls can't shoot, but I showed him your video and now he's taking me to the range." Jada smiled when she read that, because that's what she wanted, not applause but change. One afternoon, while resting after a long day, her phone rang again. It was Mrs. Alina, her old coach. "I saw you on the news again," she said proudly. You're making waves. Kid, Jada laughed. I'm just moving forward. One shot at a time. Mrs. Alina paused, then added, You've done something rare, Jada. You've made people rethink what's possible, Jada. Looked at her shelf, where the Silver Seal plaque rested next to her old air rifle target. Two worlds, side by side, the beginning and the present. She whispered, still not finished, because she knew there was more to do, not just for herself, but for every person who was told, you can't. She wanted to be the proof that you can if you're willing to work. And though she still walked in quiet footsteps, her story echoed loudly across the country, from the range to the screen, to the heart of every young person with a dream. Months passed, and Jada's name continued to spread. She was no longer just a skilled shooter or a record breaker, she had become a symbol. News articles called her the girl who silenced the range. Videos of her shooting went viral. Her calm face and perfect aim played on screens everywhere. But Jada didn't change her way of living. Every morning, she still woke up early, trained, read, and worked quietly. She refused to let fame distract her, because in her heart, she knew her story wasn't just about shooting. It was about something bigger. Fighting for your place, even when no one believes in you. One morning, Jada got an unexpected letter from Washington. The envelope had a seal on a Department of Defense. Inside was an invitation to speak at the National Defense Youth Conference. Thousands of young cadets and officers from across the country would attend. They wanted her to be the closing speaker. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't a public speaker. She didn't like the spotlight. But then she remembered that little girl from the letter. The one whose father didn't believe girls could shoot. She remembered Kayla from the base who asked, Were you ever scared? She remembered the cold stares, the quiet laughs, the moments when she had no support but kept going anyway. And she said yes. A few weeks later, Jada stood backstage at a huge auditorium in D.C. The crowd was full of cadets in uniform, officers with medals, students with dreams. Big screens behind the stage showed highlights of the speakers from earlier. But everyone was waiting for one named Jada Brooks when her name was announced. The hall became quiet. She stepped onto the stage with calm steps, wearing a plain black jacket and jeans. She looked around and saw hundreds of young faces, looking back at her, some curious, some excited, some unsure. She took a deep breath and began. I never planned to be here, she said. I was just a girl who wanted to try. I didn't have special gear. I wasn't in the military. I had no one training me at first. But I had one thing that kept me going, belief. She spoke slowly, clearly, not trying to impress, just trying to be honest. I came to our range once, and I was laughed at, she continued. Not because I was weak, not because I was unskilled, but because I didn't look like what they expected. But I kept going, even when no one clapped, even when no one watched. The crowd sat in silence, taking in every word. She told them about her early training, the wooden stick she used as a fake rifle, the hours spent hitting targets in silence, and the moments she almost quit. She told them about the SEAL Challenge, about carrying 60-pound bags, about shooting with frozen fingers, and then she said something that stayed in every listener's heart. Every time someone told me I didn't belong, they were giving me fuel, and every time I failed, I learned something new. I didn't come here to break records, she said. I came here to break limits. When she finished, there was silence, then a standing ovation. People stood up, clapping, not because of her record, but because of her truth. She had shown them what determination looked like. Not loud, not flashy, just real. After the speech, dozens of cadets lined up just to shake her hand. One boy said, I was thinking of quitting, but after hearing you, I won't. Another girl hugged her and whispered, Thank you for making space for girls like me. Jada left the stage with a quiet smile. She didn't need a trophy. She had become a light for others. Back at her hotel room, she looked. at the mirror and saw herself not as a champion, not as a speaker, just Jada, the same girl who once stared at soldiers through a fence, wondering if she belonged. That night, she received another message, this time from a school in the South. A teacher had shown her story to a group of troubled teens. Now the students wanted her to visit and teach them discipline through shooting. She read the message twice, then looked out the window at the stars. She whispered, "I'll go," because her journey wasn't over. She had more people to reach, more hands to guide, more walls to break, one bullet, one breath, one young heart at a time. She was never trying to be a hero. But by choosing not to quit, she became one anyway. And so, the girl who was once laughed at, now moved through the world as a living lesson, a story written in silence, sweat, and steel.